Open, outspoken, it's ophthalmology off the grid, an honest look at controversial topics in the field. I'm Blake Williamson. Hello and welcome to another episode of Ophthalmology Off the Grid. I'm Dr. Blake Williamson. In our previous episode, we discussed why a young surgeon might want to invest into an ambulatory surgery center. In this episode, I've asked Dr. Taylor Strange to share his experience and journey to ASC ownership. Steve Sheppard from Medical Consulting Group also shares advice for what physicians should anticipate when planning for their potential ASC future. Let's listen.
Support for this podcast comes from Bryn Mawr Communications. BMC produces a number of informative podcast series spanning a variety of topics in ophthalmology. Discover a new show at itube.net/podcasts.
Welcome to another episode of Ophthalmology Off Your Grid. I'm your host, Dr. Blake Williamson, and I am super pumped about this episode because we're still talking all about ASCs, the Ambulatory Surgery Center, which is just such a unique and special thing to have in the ophthalmology space. Last episode, our guest, Michael Patterson and Andrew Maller, kind of gave us sort of a 40,000 foot view of, why you would even want at ownership in an ASC. A lot of young ophthalmologists listening to this podcast may not even know what that's, owning an ASC is all about. Maybe they work in an academic center. Maybe they've never thought about the business dynamics of it. But my hope is that after that episode, you started to look at the real world perks of ASC ownership. So for this episode, now that you know why you might want to have ownership in an ASC, how do you go out and get it? How do you go out and build it? Right? It seems like such a daunting task for a young ophthalmologist if you have to go out and get a $3, $4, $5 million loan from a bank and build this big center, and there's all these regulations. It just seems like a tall task. Well, I have a friend of mine who's in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Dr. Taylor Strange at Alliance Vision, and he went out and did just that. So he's my guest today, along with Mr. Steve Sheppard. Steve, and the name of your consulting and business firm is?
Medical Consulting Group. We're in Springfield, Missouri, and I head up the ASC development group.
Yeah, been around a long time. Steve has amazing knowledge in this space. MCG is one of the big time players that can really help us through. So we're going to lean on him as well. But maybe we'll start off with Taylor, just kind of introducing yourself. Talk about your journey through this, because you didn't just go build an ASC right out of residency. You worked to some different practices. Maybe kind of lead in with sort of those first few years, 5, 6, 7, 10 years out of practice. Kind of what were you doing, and then kind of when did the idea form? You know what, I need to go build my own thing, and kind of give us sort of the early phases of that.
Thank you, Blake. Thanks for having me on your podcast. Taylor Strange, Alliance Vision Institute here in the Fort Worth area. I came out of residency in about 2014, and I grew up in the Fort Worth area, so I knew I wanted to come back here and practice. And initially, like most people, I joined a fairly large ophthalmology multi-specialty practice right out of residency. Great experience, but always knew I wanted to do things on my own, ultimately. And with that, the ASC was kind of always on my mind, even from the beginnings of joining a practice that owned their own ASC, but knew that, long term, you'd have to work your way into it, which is fine, which is what most situations are. But I decided, I was kind of restricted in that first practice about what I could do as far as LASIK and becoming a real refractive cataract, refractive surgeon. So since moved on, decided to start my own practice, and I opened up the doors February of 2017. Just ground zero startup, hung a shingle, didn't buy anybody's existing practice. I just knew the area because I grew up here, and I was like, wow, this Alliance area is just booming. Top 5 fastest growing areas in the United States. Everyone, just seems to be moving from California, New York, and you name it, to this area. So started networking, went out with, several ODs, just started getting my name out there, and, things just took off. You know, First year of practice, I mean, already doing, 800 cataracts, from a ground zero startup. It was just more than I imagined I could do that quick. And so I was like, wow, I really need to start thinking about building my own surgery center, because I knew that that was going to be a goal of mine, in building my practice. For all the benefits that were listed on the last podcast, um, the facility fees alone, I mean, you're going to have to operate somewhere, right? If you're doing eye surgery, right? So you can either give the hospital the facility fees, or you can keep the facility fees. So, common sense drawn out, I knew that, it was going to be a great business move long term, even though you have to go with the upfront cost of getting a pretty sizable loan. So backing up, right about 2018, when I saw, my numbers and where they're at, I got a pro forma from a third-party consulting group. And my pro forma was listed about 23 cases a week, cataracts, and about 5 yags a week. I could pretty much break even on the cost of the loan and the interest, all the taxes and everything that goes into it, which Steve Sheppard can talk about when I conclude this. But, once you kind of hit that break even number, I would say, go for it, right? Because I'm only going to go north of here. Okay. So once I got that pro forma, I went to the bank and several banks locally, and had, I was able to get it pretty easily. That I'm competing against me knowing where my practice was and where it was headed. So use that to leverage between the different banks to get a better interest rate, and decided to go with a bank locally here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area to finance it. And it's been, just the best, other than starting my own practice, the second best decision I've made so far on this journey. And it's all about, initially starting, it's about, do you have the volume to support the cost of your surgery center? Okay. Once you hit that and you can go north of it, it's all gravy after that.
I'm going to bring you in, Steve. So what do you think about his roadmap there? Because it sounds like it makes sense to me. Most people aren't going to go build an ASC right out of residency, because to Taylor's point, they don't have the volume. How are they going to do that? What bank's going to give them all that money? It makes sense to maybe get your feet under you, learn in a bit busy practice, maybe pick up some business tips along the way. Go ahead and start your own practice to build your volume, the clinic, not the ASC, just the clinic. And then once you have enough volume, that's whenever you go to the bank. Is that roadmap that he kind of did? Is that how people should do it? Are there other ways to do it? Are there better ways to do it? What would you be advising a young surgeon?
Well, I would be advising a young surgeon to pretty much follow Dr. Strange process. He made the comment that he created a financial pro forma based on some anticipated case volumes, 23 cataracts a week, 5 yags a week, roughly translates into what, 1,200 cataracts a year, 60, I guess that would be 60 out, 300 yags a year. And a really key phrase he used was, I knew I was going to go north from there. So I've been doing this 23 years now. We've done about 100 ASCs in 35 states, one in Canada. The first thing we do is create a financial pro forma from physician groups looking at potentially developing a surgery center. And I will tell you, in 23 years, I've probably told more physicians don't do it than I've told to do it, because as Dr. Strange and you, Blake, indicated, it's a significant financial commitment. that's going to go on for a long period of time. So doing it to break even isn't necessarily something I would recommend. But if your practice has the trajectory that I know yours had and Dr. Strange's practice had, then great. The light changes kind of from caution to green and go forward. But I think you may have in your introduction talked about spending $3 to $5 million. Those are really quite good numbers for a 1-room, potentially a 2-room ambulatory surgery center. That would include not only the construction of the facility, but also equipping it. And then there's a long regulatory process you go through where you're funding that often through a working capital line of credit. And so step one is find somebody, as Dr. Strange did, that can put together the numbers for you, and you can take an objective look about where am I? I mean, it may be, if your practice is growing rapidly as yours has and his did, maybe you wait 12 months. The process itself to get all the way through from bang, I want to build an ASC, to getting the first Medicare check in the mail is going to be anywhere from 18 to 24 months, depending on where you are. If you can anticipate growth during that period of time, then fine, factor that into the pro forma. If you can't, don't. It's one of our mantra at Medical Consulting Group is we don't build blue sky into these things. We want it to work. We want to know it's going to work on day one. And so, having said that, we're obviously very bullish on ambulatory surgery center development. It's very exciting for me, being the old gray-haired guy in the company, to see young physicians such as the two of you that are kind of jumping on the horse and riding it to, a win in the race. And I really do think that's really the future of the private practice of ophthalmology. And so congratulations to both of you.
I want to ask you about that because do you have a sense that today's young ophthalmologists are perhaps less entrepreneurial or take less risks than they did in the 90s whenever all this was happening? I mean, it seems like it's just so rare that you hear a story like Taylor's, like, hey, I'm going to go build an ASC from scratch, and somebody in their late 30s, early 40s. But maybe that's just me. I mean, what are y'all seeing? Are you seeing, the people that are coming to y'all to build ASCs, are most of them in their late 30s, early 40s, or most of them in their, mid to late 50s, or is it all over the map? It just seems to me that it seems like it's almost like we're less entrepreneurial, but I know we're not. I know that we're entrepreneurial in so many other ways, but maybe it's just going to the bank and getting that big loan that turns away so many of us. Maybe kind of speak to how things were 20 years ago versus now.
Well, ASCs were kind of the wild, wild west 20 years ago. I mean, the market penetration was much low. There was a lot of low-hanging fruit from my perspective in the development of centers. There were not necessarily individual physician practices, but group practices of 2, 3, 4, 5 doctors that collectively were doing 2,000, 3,000 cases a year. And at that point, it's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, you can't miss. There are only two ways you can really go wrong in looking at an ASC development. That is, overestimate the case volumes, which drive revenue. And then the second thing is build the Taj Mahal. You don't need to do that. You want a very professional, well-constructed, operationally efficient center, but it doesn't need, granite countertops every place and marble flooring and those sorts of things. That really isn't the image you want to begin with. But to kind of revert back to your first question, I think it's kind of a mixed bag. I think the young physicians coming out of programs and fellowships are kind of bifurcated at this point. I mean, we're at a point where a percentage of those folks are looking at quality of life issues more than career goals necessarily. And so they're not highly motivated to be terribly entrepreneurial. They're being bombarded with, corporate practice of medicine offers, private equity, and then the entrepreneurial route. But there's still plenty of young physicians that are very entrepreneurial, particularly in ophthalmology, because there's so many role models out there, like the two of you, and Michael Patterson and others that have created a terrific quality of life and professional portfolio that brings them great enjoyment and economic rewards. So, there's no simple answer to that. There never is.
Taylor, take us through. So now we know kind of your story before, and you decided to go ahead and build. Alliance was already open, the clinic was already open, but now it's time to build the ASC. Who knows whether you want granite countertops or not? Who knows how much that stuff costs? How did you know? So did you just hire a consulting group similar to MCG that would just kind of take you through, hey, this is what this stuff costs? And kind of take me through those 18 months that Steve referenced, that while this thing is being built, and what was it like at the ASC you are currently operating at, knowing that you were about to jump ship and take all your cases, to your place? Was that weird? That had to have been kind of weird.
Yeah, great question, Blake. Yeah, so I went ahead and traveled, around a few states, looked at Jim Loden's place up in Tennessee, saw, you want to build the Taj Mahal when you see some of these places. Tim McGarity out in Columbia, Missouri, even Greg Parkhurst down in San Antonio. You see some of these places and you're like, wow, okay. You get ideas. So I got ideas, but the main thing was really the efficiency of it. Like Steve is alluding to, you don't need gold countertops. You need efficient place, right? That's how you can move volume safely. And I feel better than any hospital situation, or most hospital situations for sure. So doing that, I met with a local builder. It's very important to get someone who has built ambulatory surgery centers. Don't get a builder, a general contractor who his first project is your ASC. Okay, it needs to be someone who's done this before and has the experience of dealing with all the Medicare codes. Life safety code is a big thing now. Has been, but it seems to be more to light lately with these construction jobs, because you want to pass obviously as fast as you can. I did use Progressive Surgical Solutions out of Tennessee, and they helped me on my project, but I didn't use them from ground zero. I mean, I did a lot of this stuff on my own. I kind of designed ideas, architect, visiting the other sites. I use them, I use their services more for the credentialing aspect of it. It's a lot of work, you have to have all the binders and all the codes. And, we did get approved the Joint Commission. We did on the very first pass, which was really awesome. And you want to pass, right? Because if you don't pass, then you can't run insurance through there. And, you got to have those, you got to pass. And Steve can probably talk more about that and how their company can get you through that process as well. And so, just stepping back again to kind of answer up on your question is, to build that refractive LASIK, laser cataract surgery practice, my vision was to have it all in-house, have the surgery there. I want to do femto cataract surgery. I want to do, it's a premium cataract surgery practice. I couldn't get that at the hospital. They wouldn't buy me a femto. They wouldn't give me, the things I need. Now I have that freedom. Like I have less stress now than I did when I was at the hospital. When I want, I got the new Artivo 800 Zeiss microscopes. I got 2 of them. one of the best decisions I've ever made. I don't have any neck issues. I'm operating in 3D. The hospital would never do that. They had a microscope, looked like it came over on the Mayflower. The visualization was terrible. And you're dealing with bureaucrats and administrators, and they're telling you all the 9 different ways that they're not going to get you what you need. Now, if I want something, I just go, I get it. Of course, reasonably budget it in your plan, don't be too outlandish, but we do femto cataract now. We do, 3D. We can run safely and efficiently, easily 6 cases an hour. I couldn't do that at the hospital, right? So I'm on the shoulders of other giants that have done this before me, and the formula is pretty easy. I just take the good and try to copy it, and then try to learn from what they did that didn't work, and try not to repeat those mistakes, And so I'm always like when surgeons come in from out of town and visit and watch surgery, and I love helping others just like you do. And so just pay it forward to the future generation.
Yeah, and talk about hiring your staff, because you're not just hiring technicians and teaching them how to refract. You're hiring nurses. You're hiring anesthesiologists. You're doing a lot. It's not just a front desk person and an office manager. How did you know how to do that? Surely that had to be something that was kind of stressful for you. Did you hire an HR company? Did you hire from within? These are all questions that people listening to this are going to kind of want to know.
Exactly. I'd say for your surgery center, the most critical piece is your director of nursing. That's your captain of the ship. And he or she runs the show and is responsible, critical for all the credentialing and the Joint Commission or Medicare, all the things that go along with your center. So that's the most important piece. So I find a director of nursing who I just was very fortunate, lucky. Our daughters play soccer together, and she's a director of nursing for the last 5 years at a different hospital, not the one I was operating at. And, she was overextended and multi-specialty and neurosurgery and ortho, and her quality of life was bad. She was the one that was putting out so many fires. And I said, hey, how would you like to come over and just do eyes and, 8 to 5, or, have much more of a lifestyle and no call and all those things. And so it's been a beautiful relationship ever since. And I feel like you first want to start with finding that director of nursing, however you can find them, like most likely in your local community. And then you could hire an HR department or someone that can help you with staffing your facility. But from there, we have nurses that came with her. We had nurses that came from other surrounding ASCs, and we just grew from there. It was not as difficult as I anticipated, but I can see how it could be if you just can't find that right person. But that's the beautiful thing, Blake. With your own facility, you can bring on great quality staff members, and then sometimes you may have to let some go. But I would not have that freedom at the ASC or any other ASC that I was operating at.
Steve, can these things, can people go to MCG and have y'all help with things like that? How to do staffing, how to, find a DON? Can you kind of walk me through the types of questions and the type of, how do you facilitate this for doctors, and maybe talk about what payment is? I mean, do you get a percentage of what the build out is? Is it a flat fee? You don't have to mention numbers, but what kind of cost, how do you get paid?
I'd be happy to address that. And by the way, Dr. Strange is exactly right. The key hire is the nurse director. I mean, the person that makes the trains run on time. You want somebody ideally that is, for lack of a better description, the best nurse in the place. Well, and the other aspect of that is a huge percentage of caregivers, particularly nurses, are introverts. I mean, they're other-oriented kind of people. And you'd like to find somebody that's at least a borderline extrovert, that can be a good team leader, can be a disciplinarian when they need to be. And then ideally, somebody that has ASC experience as opposed to spent their entire career in the hospital. because the last thing you want to hire is your team leader that now wants to turn your ASC into a hospital and make it operate like a hospital. You know, Dr. Strange said he was doing 6 cases an hour. I assume if you're doing that out of one room, I'm really impressed. But if you're working out of 2, okay, you know, that's perfect. I mean, that's a very efficiently run ASC. Back to your question, this whole process is a team sport. So perhaps you need a consulting firm. There are several, you know, that specialize in ophthalmology. Progressive Surgical is one. We're one. There are a couple of others. Our process is a little different. We tend to be, I've tried for 23 years to come up with a better tagline than turnkey, but we have a whole team of people that gets involved in the process. We have 3 RNs that really get involved in the equipment sourcing, bringing on board the clinical director who then works with them to build out the team. We provide all the intellectual property. We're there. We actually, percentage of our fee is withheld until you're Medicare certified. So, you know, we're there through the entire process. We work on a fixed fee. It, you know, kind of has nothing to do with what the construction cost is or the scope of the project. And, you know, in for a penny, in for a pound. We just like to work that way. We get involved when it's a gleam in your eye, and we're there until you pass your Medicare certification survey. And we've tried to work on aspects of the project that, in our experience, has been less efficient than really, you know, being involved from kind of day one.
So in these last couple minutes here that we have, Steve, I'm going to ask you to kind of, you know, give me some you know, wrap up thoughts from your end. Maybe just kind of mention some common mistakes or some real successes that you commonly see people make, and, you know, what are some things to kind of look out for, and then kind of Taylor, you can take us home after that. Similar question, you know, what are some things that you did wrong, or advice that you were given that maybe wasn't the best advice, maybe you wish you had done something different, mistakes you made, and just kind of some final pearls as we wrap it up. Steve, you start.
Okay, and it's very unlike me, but I'll try to be brief. The most important thing is to put together a good team. If you have a consultant that's working on the financial analysis and is going to be there through the process, that's one. An architect and an engineering firm that is very experienced in the development of surgery centers is also important, as Dr. Strange mentioned, I think, because it's a highly regulated entity that you're developing. It's not like building a medical office building. The general contractor is equally important. They need to have commercial experience, ideally with hospitals or surgery centers or both. And then the major subcontractors, electrical, HVAC, plumbing, medical gas, those people shouldn't be the first time around the block for them as well, because they're complicated structures to build, but with a good team, it can go very, very efficiently, very economically efficiently, and smoothly. As far as mistakes, you know, overbuild it, lie to the person putting the pro formas together about your surgical volumes, and that's about it. There are only 2 ways you can really screw it up if you have adequate volumes, as everybody else, as you all have indicated before.
Taylor, take us home.
All right, Blake, thank you. I'll start with some of the mistake that I encountered on this project that I built, and then I'll end with the good and the pearls for the very end. But, you know, I would say I did come in a little late on using the third party to come in to oversee the architectural plans before, right when construction. So there was some re-architectural engineering with some of the life safety features of the construction project. Not a huge hiccup, you know, maybe a month, but we did have to reconfigure some things. So I would suggest any surgeon to to get with a third party such as what Steve Sheppard provides to maybe earlier on the project, because you can make some mistakes and they can be costly mistakes, and delaying your construction is going to cost you on the bottom line in the long run. So get in early on with these third parties to help you build these projects. And then some pearls here. Of course, the elephant in the room with this, Blake, is that you do need to be in a state that has a certificate of need. Your state, my state, Texas, Louisiana, we're fortunate enough to have that. And other states where you don't have it, you need a certificate of need, it's going to be an obstacle, maybe not even possible. So that's kind of rule number one. And if you're a progressive surgeon and you want to do volume, and you get to that level, it's very, very doable. Don't think the bank loan and it's just to run you away. I mean, your volume alone is going to pay for your loan if you're at that level. Now, that's the important part. Like Steve said, you have to be at that level. Don't lie to yourself. And then everything above that, you're going to be very, very happy. And that's where I'm at right now. And I'm only 2.5 years with my surgery center now.
Yeah, and I think that those are such great pearls. I think that we could talk about this in a week-long course, but for this podcast, we just wanted to kind of scratch the surface of how you can go out and get it. If you want to learn more, I definitely recommend you reach out to Steve and his group over at a medical consulting group, and of course, reach out to Taylor at Alliance as well, and they can tell you more about it. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this episode of Ophthalmology Off the Grid. Thank you for listening to another episode of Ophthalmology Off the Grid, and thank you to my colleagues, Dr. Taylor Strange and Steve Sheppard. Until next time, this is Dr. Blake Williamson signing off.